We've already looked at the landlord's lien and security interest because this is, take a look in the blue right here. This is the UCC filing. This is the clause that mentions the UCC code, okay? So again, that slide that you had earlier that explains what it is, this is exactly when it gets put into play. I'm leasing space from the landlord, but I may also be leasing equipment from somebody else. And even when I do a lockout, I can keep my tenant stuff, but I can't keep other people's stuff. And everybody should have filed their leases with the Secretary of State. Assigning and subletting, the tenant may not assign this lease or sublet it without the landlord's written consent. Relocation, one of my favorites. Let me tell y'all something, this is not written with the tenant in mind. Providing the tenant with not less than 90 days. I'm happy about the 90. The landlord may require the tenant to get out of the space they're in and go on somewhere else on the same property. I need to move you, Gail. I need to, Carolyn, I like you. You wonderful, Carolyn and Veronica, Amy. But look at here. Victoria's Secret want to come in and I need that prime space up front. So I'm gonna move you to a different suite on the property. And they do that. But they can move you to a place that's equal or larger in size. The landlord will pay the tenant's reasonable out-of-pocket moving expenses. The landlord will also pay for the printing of stationery and business cards. Hands in the air for everybody who wants to know what's wrong with that paragraph, because that thing is wrong. If you don't care, I'll keep going. But if you need, y'all want to know what's up with that particular paragraph? I'll tell y'all what it doesn't do. 90 days is cool. Appreciate that. Don't make me shut down today. However, maybe I didn't want a space of equal or larger size. Maybe I took this big old suite because I wanted to be at this address, but I prefer less space. Consult with your client. They might have wanted to go to a smaller one. Put that in there instead. You also need to make notations. Catch what I'm about to throw to you. If you move me to a smaller suite, then we need to adjust the rate of base rent accordingly. You understand what I'm saying? We need to adjust that. But, and this is the square footage. It's a square footage thing. I have less square feet, so charge me less. However, if we're going to agree to go to a space of larger size, somewhere in there, you need to have written that my rent remains the same. See how bad this can go for your client? I can move you to a space twice as big as the one you got. It didn't say anything about what's going to happen with your rent. You need to cover your bases. The other thing I'm not a fan of is landlord will pay reasonable out-of-pocket moving expenses. I am 49 years old. I hate moving. I don't like it. Once I'm in, I'm settled. So what I prefer to see in there, if I was repping a tenant, is you gonna pack me, move me, and unpack me. I don't care if you think it's reasonable or not. I'm not a fan of that language. That language doesn't cover everything it needs to cover. Also, it says that you're gonna pay for printing of my stationery and business cards. If you want your client to never be relocated, what you're gonna add in here is the following. You're going to pay and reimburse me or replace anything I have that has the old address in it. Catch what I'm throwing at you. That's every ink pen, koozie, Facebook ad, billboard, airplane with the banner running behind it. Y'all see where I'm going, right? That's every envelope, business card, pencil, stylus, whatever you did. Some little league team is running around with your logo on it with a suite number that doesn't apply. You can replace those too. Landlord looks at that massive monster list of stuff and they'll leave your client alone. So stopping at stationery and business cards, it's insufficient. Not to me, it is. It's insufficient. So fight for that one. Replace everything that had the old address in it. Or you can just choose this right here. You can choose, if they will let you do this, the area with the heart, landlord may not relocate me to another area. But if they insist, you make sure that paragraph's got them covered. Moving forward. All right, subordination. Don't get nerved up when you see one of these come across your desk there. Subordination is normal. We usually get us a document. I'm trying to find the slide that we're on here. We usually get a document that notifies the tenant that if a lender gets involved, the tenant must recognize the lender as the landlord. And it's kind of written right here. I thought someone was knocking at my door. Excuse me, my friends. This lease and tenant's leasehold interest are subject, are and will be subject to subordination and are inferior to any lien or encumbrance and ground lease or the property that the landlord authorizes. Now, what this really needs to say is this: there's going to be a document called the SNDA. And I'm going to make this short for you. The SNDA stands for subordination, non-disturbance, and attornment. I'm going to put that in the chat for you. The SNDA comes to you from the tenant. And what it says is subordination, non-disturbance. It's in the chat, my friends. What it says is if the landlord has to take a step back and the lender begins to run the property because the landlord is defaulting and may have to give up this property, and the last one is attornment, that everyone's going to recognize her as landlord. The non-disturbance part says that, look, I'm going to let you continue to operate. And you can see non-disturbance referenced right here. It is mentioned. We're not going to disturb you. We're going to let you finish what you started, your business. Attornment also means that there's a attornment right there for you, that the landlord is also going to be recognizing the lender as the new landlord. Everybody's got to subordinate now to the lender. Landlord, you screwed up. You defaulted. So tenant and landlord, everyone's subordinating to the lien holder now. And we're not going to disturb the leases in place. All it means, it's a lot of fancy language, but it is normal for these documents to be issued about once every 2 years to tenants. Just have them sign it. They're not giving away any rights. And the estoppel documents, I think I show you one shortly, but that document needs to be signed with 10 days after receipt from the landlord. The landlord needs your client to just sign it and turn it back in. All it is a short form of everything you agreed to in your master lease. That's all. It's just a short form. And that might be going to a lender to verify the rent roll, or it may be going to a prospective buyer who needs to see who's on the property. Then we've got a request for financial information no more frequently than once every 12 months. Let me tell you something. Once you get it, when I move in, that's the only time you need it. I'm not a fan. Right? You don't need to check. Let me catch what's being thrown here. I let the landlord credit every 12 months who's in the driver's seat for lease renewal. The landlord. That means he or she will know how well I'm doing in business if I let him dip in my credit and ask for this financial information every 12 months. That's a strikeout for me. Let me make sure I got everything up you all need to see, because this one had quite a few. Let's see, blue circle and arrow and a line. All right, here we go. Yes.
I'm sorry, it's Amy. What about if the hat was on, you were wearing the other hat and you were repping the landlord, would you suggest he get financial information once every 12 months?
Absolutely. Oh, I'm gonna go for it if I can. But I think many of you are gonna represent tenants well before you represent landlords. So if you're on the tenant side of the table, that's your best bet. If you're repping the landlord, you go for the throat, my friend. And you go for that $65 in air conditioning. I'm saying you go for it. Get it. All right. Casualty loss. Tenant must immediately notify the landlord of any casualty loss. I've had to deal with this a lot, drives me insane. If the leased premises are less than 50% unusable, less than 50%, and the landlord can substantially restore the premises in 120 days after they've been notified of the casualty, landlord will restore the leased premises to substantially the same condition. If the landlord fails to do so, the tenant may terminate the lease. By the way, there's a weird little note right in there. That little odd gap really is in the lease document. Not sure why it's there, but it's a weird looking thing. If you catch it, just want you to note it's in almost all of them. If the lease premises, we're talking about casualty loss and damage to the property. If the lease premises are more than 50% unusable, people like me tend to use the word untenable, and landlord can substantially restore it within 120 days, the landlord may choose to terminate this lease or restore the property to the same condition. If the landlord chooses to restore and does not do it, then the tenant can terminate this lease. So this all came into play when Hurricane Harvey happened, Hurricane Ike happened, people drive into buildings. All this stuff comes into play. If the landlord notifies the tenant that they cannot substantially restore the premises in 120 days, the landlord may choose not to do so and or restore and notify the tenant and give the tenant the option of terminating this lease by notifying within 10 days. And then last but not least, if this lease does not terminate because of a casualty loss, rent will be reduced from the date the tenant notifies the landlord of the casualty loss. So there's some help here, but I want you to not skip over this with your clients so they can be aware of what happens when damage occurs. I've even had a fire happen and we had to restore the place. Let's see if this page needs, I got a couple of boxes here. I got a blue box I need to put up. Here we go. That's everything. Condemnation. If after a condemnation or purchase in lieu of condemnation, the lease premises are totally unusable, blah, 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 this lease will terminate. But the big thing that might have gotten your attention is what is a purchase in lieu of? And I had to go look it up. And there's a lot to know about this, and it's not my wheelhouse, but I also don't like leaving you guys lingering, Erica. So per Texas A&M's Real Estate Center, there's a document called Understanding the, I didn't spell it, Condemnation Process in Texas. Its author is Judon Fambro. It describes the government's obligations to land and property owners regarding condemnation. And I yanked out one little quote I thought you might want to see. You are entitled to a bona fide, good faith effort to negotiate the acquisition by purchase in lieu of condemnation. That means we can negotiate the sale of this property before you just get to things away from me. Let's talk about it first. You can't just come up in here and start, coming in with a wrecking ball. I need to take some of your property. You are due some conversation. If you want more details, 1, get an attorney. 2, you might reference this book and take a look at it yourself and study. I want to put in that blue box up there for you, just making sure you remember eminent domain, the right of the government to seize property and transfer its use from private to public. Condemnation is the legal process we use to seize the property via eminent domain. Just want to put that up there just as a reminder because many of us don't deal with it. All right, let's see. What do we have on this particular slide? Let me see if I can circle down to the funny little, we don't have to linger here, but I want you to note each party and each signatory to this lease represents that it is not a person named as a specially designated national and blocked person. Has anybody ever seen what that is? Does anybody know who's on the specially designated national and blocked persons list? Let's move on, and I'm going to show you about that list. Bam, this is not in your book, so you might want to snap it in case your clients go, wait, what? The Office of Foreign Assets Control of the Department of Treasury administers and enforces economic and trade sanctions against targeted foreign countries and regimes, terrorists, international narcotics traffickers, persons engaged in the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. You get where you're going, y'all. That's a whole bunch, right? Scroll down a little bit, and the OFAC publishes a list of those entities and persons designated as specially designated nationals. So SDN's assets are blocked, and U.S. persons are generally prohibited from dealing with them. Let me tell you, in 49 years of living my life, I ain't never been made aware that I'm not legally allowed to deal with someone on this list. I feel informed now. What, Cheyenne? What you got going on over there? What? Benjamin all up into terrorists? What's happening? What do we know? What do you know, Cheyenne, about this crazy list? Uh-oh, Cheyenne.
My wife works in a government agency, and I hear about this stuff on a regular basis, so that's why I can't comment on it. But yeah, it is real, and they are out there looking to rent space. Believe it or not. Yeah. So yes.
Thank you for letting me know that they really do want to rent space. So everyone's proverbial backside is covered. We all don't really need to look at this too deeply because we've seen this in other contracts. Let me put this back up for you. But I want you to be aware of something. And this, Matthew, I made a mistake earlier. This is what you and I were talking about. Take a look here. We kind of spoke about the fact that in commercial, we don't notify people of intermediary. And in a lease document, even like a sale document, but more prevalently in the lease document. First of all, Matthew, how long is your longest lease? How long is the longest one you've ever seen? About 50 pages?
No, yeah.
Okay, I think I've gotten up to 73. Why we need 73 pages of documentation is beyond me, right, Miguel? I have no idea. But I'm familiar with what's in there. And what I know for sure is this. One more time. If you get a lease document from the landlord or property management company and it's not a TXR lease, I need you to scoot on to the back. If it is a 50-page lease like Matthew had, you need to be looking somewhere around page 43 through 47 and find that paragraph one more time called representation. And in the back, or it'll be called brokerage. And in the back, it'll say the only broker that is a party to this transaction is, and you're not included. And you need to make sure that you have a strike through in there or that it is amended to include and recognize you. I've seen some people get, kind of left out of their own deal mistakenly and not realize what was going on. Likewise, intermediary notifications, they're still in play, just like they were for residential, but it almost never happens in commercial. So be sure you notify folks if you've got both sides of the deal. Just don't get counted out, right, Matthew? It will count you out. I'm trying to tell you, we're a little ruthless around here. Sharing the wrong screen, hold on. There we go. But we saw this, so we don't need to linger here. You saw your foreigners. Let's see. These are your fees. This is how we're getting paid. Now, the principal broker's fees are either going to be paid from a special separate written agreement, or we're going to go ahead and use the broker's fee form 2102. Same thing for cooperating broker. What are we using? A separate written agreement, or are we going to go ahead and use the broker's fee addendum there, 2102? You just need to specify what we're doing. Notices, if it ain't in writing, you didn't tell me. One of the things I love, though, is that this is changed to include emails as well. So notice must be given. But it also include, there it is, tenant consents to receive notices by email. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware that this was something that didn't used to exist. So I'm very happy to see emails are acceptable for notification. Agreement of parties. Well, let me just put up a few things here for you all to see. Couple of lines. There we go. Severable clauses. If any clause in this lease is found invalid or unenforceable by court of law, it doesn't mean the rest of the lease is invalid. It just means those clauses are. The rest of this doc is going to stay in place. And waiver. Landlords delay, waiver, or non-enforcement of acceleration, some contractual or statutory lien, rental due date, or other right will not be deemed a waiver of other obligations, or I should say other breaches by the tenant for this lease. Just because I let you go on late rent doesn't mean I'm going to always do it. Just because I let you slide on delivering your insurance renewal documents doesn't mean other areas of this lease you can slide on as well. So just because they don't enforce something, they don't kick you out, it doesn't mean that this thing is not still in effect. It's an interesting little clause there. Quiet enjoyment. Put this up here, get your lines in place. Quiet enjoyment, provided that the tenant is not in default in this lease, landlord says that it will let the tenant enjoy possession and use of this free from material interference. Leave my client alone. And I mean my tenant client. Time is of the essence. This does not count until actual spans of time are specific here. Just want you to understand that. Specific. And then brokers, there's your get out of jail free card again. You're not allowed to do any of this. Render legal advice, talk about the results of inspections, offer that tax advice, etc. Move on. Expense reimbursement. You got some triple nets we need to put into play. Bam. Saw my little arrow moving there. We have got a few things to put up, and it's actually quite a bit. Let me get it all up there for you. There's a lot to know. Sorry about that. Just about everything on here is important. All right, expense reimbursement. That means we're giving back the money to the landlord that he or she spent to keep the property maintained. So if we have ourselves a triple net situation where a tenant is going to reimburse taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance, this is the form that puts the money on the table. So take a look here. This stuff is called expense reimbursements. Sometimes it's called additional rent. That's what's in the circle. Sometimes, as we saw in the other document, it's just called rent. If you were ever unclear about what a person like me means, ask, Mish, did you just mean base rent or did you mean additional rents? What were we talking about? It's okay to ask because we do flip terms constantly. Your pro rata share, that is the portion of the property that your client is occupying. We've covered this, I believe, in section 2. If your client has 3,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet that we can lease up, that's a 3 that goes in there. So your client has 3% of the property. That means they get 3% of the landlord's bills. Now take a look at what CAM. CAM means all of the landlord's expenses incurred to maintain, repair, operate, etc. For lighting, security, painting, blah, blah, blah. Read that. Pest control. CAM does not include, and this is what's written in red, capital expenditures, interest, depreciation, tenant improvements. You're not paying for other people's paint jobs, okay? Let's see. CAM is common area maintenance, so that is not the same as insurance and taxes, but that doesn't mean you're not paying back insurance and taxes. It's just specifying that CAM doesn't mean. Notwithstanding the foregoing, CAM does not include the amortized costs incurred by the landlord for making capital improvements, but it doesn't mean you're not going to pay them back in some fashion. You will. It's just not the same line item. So these costs will be amortized over the useful life of the improvement. And it says on a straight line basis. That might be a little bit more than you ever needed to see. So I put in the purple box here for anybody that wants to go dig deeper. Straight line basis is a method of calculating depreciation and amortization. Some people call it straight line depreciation, and it is the simplest way to work out the loss of value of an asset over time. Your tenant will never likely ask you what that means, but in case they do, there it is. Let me just share with you one thing. When we are billing your client back for CAM, there are a couple of things you need to know for sure. One, and there's so much to tell, it's just sickening. In an office building setting, you will see a line item for any repairs done to air conditioning systems in an office building, because I control that. In a retail setting, you will not see air conditioning repair or replacement, because in a retail setting, every single tenant has their own air conditioning system. There is something that happens every year. 20 years I've been doing this, I see it every year. I will value one tenant over the other, and I need them to stay because it's going to be renewal time, right? So as a gesture to get you to stay, let me put in a new air conditioning unit. But I'll forget to take that air conditioning unit out of what I bill your client back for common area maintenance in a retail environment. In retail, you should not ever really see air conditioning. That's every tenant's responsibility. Erica, did I throw you? You catching what I'm throwing, Veronica? I know it's a lot. Y'all call me when you need me. There's too much to know and there's not enough room to tell it. But common area maintenance is a tricky thing. And you really do need to know what you're looking at when that time comes and what your client's being billed back for. And in this case, you need to know certain building types don't bill back for everything. So just bear that in mind when you look at this. The other thing I wanted to mention, and someone forgot to share with me, and Amy, I think in a court of law, a text might be writing, by the way. Structured, single tenant versus multi-tenant structures. I asked you all to remind me about bondable leases, bondable net leases, absolute triple nets. When you see on this page, and I'm about to go ahead and put it up so we can see it and discuss it at the same time. Come on there, share my document, please. All right, there we go. When we get to this page, method of reimbursement, this is going to be key for you to understand. How are we reimbursing the landlord? And let me put it all up here for you. If we're going to use the triple net, we're going to use B3. It even says net right there for you. Do you all remember when we discussed, and let me put a few more bells and whistles. I think I got one more thing to put up. Let me just put them up here, y'all. Let me put check marks in the boxes and an orange box at the bottom. Now you can photograph that slide. If we're doing a triple net, you will click B3, and then you'll make sure to check taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance. But if it's a single tenant building and the landlord also checked structural and this last box down here and filled in the blanks, you have what's called an absolute net lease or a bondable lease. And what that means is trouble for your tenant, because the tenant is going to be billed for everything: roof, foundation, plumbing, all of it. You might as well what? Own the building. Own it. I've had people call me up crying because they couldn't understand why somebody wouldn't fix the roof. Well, I looked at the lease. You said you would. So be very clear about which boxes are checked, or if you get one of them 50-page humdingers that Matthew was mentioning, you read and you get clear, how much is my client responsible for repairing? Because it could be the whole thing, in which case you are in a bondable lease, a bondable net lease. Let me go back and share. We're going into another break so we can wrap up our day. The other ways to calculate rent, and we will not discuss this at length. I'm sorry. Come and take the 101 classes and I will get you there. But you've got base year leases. You will mostly see these in office buildings. And then you've got expense stops. These are also things you may see in office buildings. I had mentioned the other day, the expense stop is the trouble area. It is also a dinosaur in our industry, my friends. It's not used often. If you see expense stop, call me. We need to do something else, okay? Now, the base year is quite common in office buildings, but let me say this. If you represent a tenant who was presented with a triple net renewal, but had originally signed a base year lease, that's normal. There's a reason, but it's normal. And I'm going to just say this in the simplest of terms. When a landlord in an office building asks for your client to reimburse expenses using a base year calculation, the landlord's only getting paid on that fraction. I think we might have covered this in class. You're getting paid on a piece of their expenses. If the landlord bills your client for expenses using the triple net calculations, the landlord's billing back your client for their part of everything, not a piece. Landlords prefer triple nets. And so when an investor buys a building and discovers all those leases are base year leases, you'd better believe that when the renewal happens, everyone's getting flipped over to a triple net, and it's normal. Has anyone ever seen this in the business before? I know that was way too much. If you ever find this happening in your world, buzz me, I'll get you through it. But it is quite normal to see that in an office building environment. People are getting away from base years and rolling everybody over to a triple net because landlords can recover more. We're almost there, my friends, almost there. This is, again, your triple net lease, and this is going to go ahead and say that this is how much it's going to cost per square foot. The monthly rate, annual rate, there you go. And a couple of underlines in blue and green. Let me just get that there in our special provisions for you. I want you to notice what's in red. If I underbilled you, your triple nets, and underbilling happens often. I'm coming after the tenant to say, you owe me a little bit more than I thought, and you only have 30 days to give it to me. And I need you to understand that that number is usually 4 and 5 figures. Anyone coming at you, Amy, saying, hey, by the way, I underbilled you by $6,000 and you got 30 days to pay it, will have you faint on the spot. Fight to change that number if you can, my friends. Get 3 months if you can, 6 months if you're that bold. And I used to actually give my tenants 9 months to pay it back. I used to give my tenants 9 months. Benjamin Campos, do you fill in both? Which part were you looking at, the monthly versus annual?
Yes, the annual and the monthly rate.
You can fill in both, absolutely. $6.55 as an annual rate equals 55 cents as a monthly rate. Sometimes your client needs to see both numbers to run their own calculations. Fill it all in. You can absolutely do both. Landlord, now this is what I think is hilarious because it's not gonna happen. Landlord will promptly refund to the tenant any overpayment, but catch it, only if it's revealed by an audit or an examination. So, tenant, if you want to audit the landlord's books to make sure you're being billed, properly, and you find out that you're being overbilled, landlords are hard to get a check out of. They may try to negotiate with you that we'll let you burn off the credit on your account rather than cut your check. So keep your eyes on that particular line because it may be altered. and where we are in our class so we can get to the end of the road. Quick question on the table. We really are at the end of our day. We've only got just a few slides left to see, and then we've got exam review. Let me ask you all, do you all need group time? Because what I can do is what we did last time, leave this window open and let you use what remains of the last hour together. How is everybody doing? Do we need group time? And this is for your capstone projects. I see a vote for low group time. Do you want the group time now or at the end? This is your class to run, my friends. Chandra says, give it to me at the end. Anybody else? Everybody's okay. I'm seeing the end. All right. So I'm going to ask you guys to take a short break and come back at 4 o'clock straight up. So I can, because some of you have some things you need to take care of today and I'm aware of. We can finish a little faster. So if you don't mind coming back no later than 5 minutes after the hour, that's about a 10-minute break. It's 3:54, 5 minutes after the hour. It's a lot, isn't it? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So, I am working with a client for a lease. And when I talked to the agent, she said that the CAM was 31 cents and the base rent was $1 per square foot. So she didn't mention triple N.
That is triple net.
That is
She said, what was 31 cents?
the CAM.
Okay, let me back up. She gave you a part of triple net. And listen, we make a mistake all the time. You have to ask for clarity. In our business, we have a tendency to call triple net CAM, like you know the difference.
Mhm.
Probably did mean triple net, but we'll call it CAM just because that's how we are. So ask her as a point of clarity, did you mean triple nets or is this really just the CAM portion of triple nets? Because don't forget, triple nets is taxes, insurance, and CAM. Now,
Okay.
don't want to ask her. There's another way for you to backdoor and answer for yourself if you don't want to give away your newness to the industry. Go look at other buildings in that area and see what triple net rates tend to be. If everyone else's triple net rates are 35 cents a square foot, then that's what she meant. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, but we have a bad habit of using CAM and triple net like they're the same when truly they're not.
Okay.
Good catch on your part.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very good catch.
So, Mish,
Yes.
okay, so I have another question. So we're, me and the client is going out on Wednesday to see the building, okay?
Uh-huh.
But do I do the letter of intent after first? That's the first thing that I send to the agent, the letter of intent.
That is going to come after your tour,
Okay,
unless the agent repping the landlord has said, look, I got 6 LOIs on the table. Your client is like, oh my gosh, hurry up and get mine in. Sometimes people are in a rush and they say, just send it in whether we've seen the space or not. But for
okay,
the most part, in usual circumstances, tour the property, then produce your LOI.
okay. Okay, all right.
Good
Okay.
luck with it too.
Yeah, it's like my first one. So yeah, I will be calling you like, okay, what's the next step? Okay, I'm just.
And look, and it's one of those things where I don't speak on it often because again, it's an abuse of this platform, but
Mhm.
through coaching, if your broker is okay with it, I do coach people with their transactions, especially when they're new to them. So, if it's needed, let me know.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Uh-oh, news. Benjamin, there's a note in the chat for you, sir. Okay. I like the head wrap, Chandra. That's a cute look.
You.
It's a cute look on you.
I was lazy, so headband it was this morning.
Well, if you'll notice, I changed out of my Longhorn shirt and put on,
I did.
it's not easy sitting down all these hours. I know y'all know. It's difficult.
I'm actually a super klutz, so I was wondering if maybe during lunch you spilled something on it, because that's what I would do.
I just, I don't know. I wasn't feeling the t-shirt and I left for lunch. It was a short sleeve shirt. So I went and put this thing on, plus a jacket. So yeah. I changed. Now, if you see this again tomorrow, that's when you can't say nothing, okay? Y'all gotta act like y'all didn't see this today. Let's see, we got 2 minutes and we're back from break and we can wrap this up, my friends. Especially because it's Monday. I know y'all got things to do. I am so cold sitting in this window. One more minute and we're back in it. Because we don't have much to go at all before we hit exam review. So maybe 6 slides. 9, about 9 slides. All right, it's time to make the magic happen. The magic of finishing a little earlier than later. So we're going to hit the percentage rent addendum. And do you guys remember what percentage rent is used for? You might remember. It is, I'm looking around. Nope, that was Erica adjusting hair. Anybody remember what percentage rent is used for? Big box retailers. Mom and pops can use it too. Go, Benjamin, what you got?
So it's usually for people that will have a small percentage of sales for maybe, February through April, but then they do a lot of business in the summer, or they do a lot of business around Christmas or whatever, or some people, they are, super slow during the summer, like schools and whatnot.
Both of you are absolutely correct. So seasonal businesses benefit from the percentage rent addendum. So, but to Chandra's credit, the people who usually use them tend to be big box tenants. Mom and pops can use them too. So let me help you guys out. One of the things that happens in this market, and in my experience, this is not a blanket thing, but I'm not ashamed to say that in my field, the Christian church in particular is seen as a troublesome tenant, not because they're Christians, but because of the attendance habits of its members. When are Christian churches heavily attended? What 3 holidays get people in church?
Easter, Christmas.
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day, right. Easter, Christmas, and Mother's Day. So people go, churches are packed, and the collection plate goes by 6 times, honey. They trying to make up that money because wasn't nobody there in March. You know what I'm saying? So they have slow periods. I can't say that there is anything that happens in the 4th of July that makes people run to the Christian church, but they are busy during those 3 months, and then they have these slower periods. And then they will come ask me for a break in rent. Can't have one. You signed a lease that says you could pay. So the solution here is this. When we have a seasonal business like a daycare, Benjamin was saying, you've got tutorial centers. We've got even a gym. Gyms are busy January, February, Christmas, people are trying to get in shape. And then they forget. They pick up again around spring break and summertime. Then they slow down when school starts. If you've got a business that performs seasonally, which means your income takes dips and has rises, that means you already know you're not going to make money. You're going to have trouble paying rent. So this thing says, I, as the landlord, am going to go ahead and let you come in at a rental rate you can afford, regardless of whether it's Easter, Christmas, or Mother's Day. So we're going to keep the rental rate down here. I can still make money as a landlord. This works for me. It's not the best, but it works for me. And this works for you too. The agreement on the table is this. When your cash register or your collection plate gets a little busier, once you pass a certain amount of income, I get a piece of your income to supplement this rent. And if we never go above that number, then you're good. You're paying this number we negotiated down here. So until you do better, you don't pay better. That's it. Many, many big box tenants do this. Victoria's Secret does this. All of my big ones, my Palais Royals of the world. Say the church would tell me if they're leasing storefront space when they're, they want to do percentage rent, because they'll know. And I have to show you the math to fully answer the question you're about to ask me, Chandra. So let me show you the math. I think that'll help you get there, because you're not going to designate which months you expect to have to share your profits. We're going to designate a dollar amount instead. So let me just show it to you, Chandra, and then you let me know if you still have a question. Put this back up on the slide. Somebody else called my name. I heard a gentleman's voice.
It was me, Miguel. I was gonna share that the mall, it's a standard thing. Like
It is.
everybody who goes into the mall, we charge them percentage rent. Like
That's when I first found out about it, when I was working at that wackadoo mall. Yeah.
yeah,
They
so
got seasons.
they have an
up in there.
option. It's not an option there.
Absolutely. So let me see, share the screen. Now, this document, for everything I just said, you're going to love this. This document is 1 page long. That's it. The only thing that's missing is the signature area at the bottom of the page. It's a 1-pager. Now, what the heck are you supposed to do with this? It's ridiculous. If I handed this to you, yeah, fill it in, we'll get her done. What in the world? It just left you hanging. So let me go ahead and fill it in for you. Let me put some notations in here for you. There we go. Got some stars, got some lines coming. Let's see, down to an arrow on the side. All right. Lots of stuff you could glaze over. I don't want you to. Gross sales means the total of all receipts of any business conducted from the leased premises. But your client needs to be specific about what a gross sale is. Please don't let that stand as it is. Your client needs to tell it, and I'm going to show it to you in just a second. Also, be sure that you are clear that percentage rent, we're going to give a certain percent of our money to the landlord. You need to calculate that and make sure that works. Are we going to make this calculation, though, in paragraph B based on either the monthly rent or some other factor? Please write on your paperwork, because I didn't write it in for you. Option 1 is what we call the natural breakpoint. Option 1 is the natural breakpoint. Option 2 is what we call an artificial breakpoint. This is not the typical form. That ain't normal. Miguel, are you used to hearing natural and artificial breakpoints? Yeah, this is not what we usually do out there in the world. So I want to make that differentiation. In number 1, that's the equivalent, that's Texas Realtors equivalent of natural. Number 2, artificial. D, the tenant will maintain accurate financial books and records regarding those gross sales. The landlord may inspect those books at any time. Let's get on down the road. None of this is in your book. I am giving away yet another portion of my commercial leasing contracts 101 class. If I have not proven the point that you should ask your respective boards to get that class over to you, this should be proving it to you, because a lot of what you all have gotten today comes from other classes. Hey, Miguel, what is typical percentage? Well, Miguel, tell you what, let's look at this example together and then have Miguel also answer the question. Few definitions you need to know of. Breakpoint, that is a preset level of sales. And once we hit that level of sales, then I start collecting some of your money. That is the percentage rent. Simplest way I can put it. The natural breakpoint is going to make sure that you can cover your rent first. Then I start looking at your money. So your rent is key for me here. I need you to honor the original agreement to pay base rent. The artificial breakpoint is an arbitrarily set number. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you can get yourself in a little bit of trouble. That is a tool I use in a different class. So the landlord might say, I want 5% of your gross sales above your natural breakpoint. Miguel, is this a number you've seen, 5-6%? What do you usually see?
Well, I mean, in the mall, you see a whole different numbers. We used to have a license agreement, which is up to a year on the contract, and those was standard off of 15%. 1.5. Yeah, it was a lot.
That's high.
Yeah, and it was mainly out of a natural breakpoint, and
Okay.
then for leases depends in the typical store or the product that they sell. So once you see their business
Gross
plan and
sales.
analysis and their sales in other malls, either other stores that they have, then you calculate more or less how much you're gonna do in our area, and then we'll base it out from there, and we'll start negotiating the percentage.
Candace, and thank you very much, Miguel, because this is very dependent upon what you do. Now, my friend Candace say, don't fuss at me. So I'm not fussing at Candace because I admit I did move the slide quickly. Please go ahead and photograph it. Did you get it? She's so kind. She said, do not fuss at me.
It's the 2106, the short one.
There you go. It's just a
Ma'am.
document.
Thank you.
No problem. The only thing missing is signatures at the bottom. All right, so my friends, the landlord might say to a small mom and pop tenant, I'd like 5% of your gross sales above your natural breakpoint. That sentence is common to me. I'm sure Miguel hears some kind of variation of a sentence just like that. And he's already told you they prefer natural breakpoints. First, you need to define those gross sales. For those of you who are aggravated by vocabulary, understand that gross sales is a net number. You're going to do everything at the cash register and then start removing things. Everything that happened at the cash register minus employee discounts, sales of things like stamps, money orders, and lottery tickets. Y'all know that lottery money don't belong to your client anyway, right? So there's some things that may have to come out of what happened at the cash register. So make sure your client defines the gross sales paragraph, okay? That's not your business. That's something they need to do. Use the special provisions if you need to define this further. But let's keep going to get Raymond's answer here. Landlord, want 5% of your gross sales above your natural breakpoint. Here is a simple formula. We're going to do this on an annual basis, even though this is typically performed monthly. I'm using an annual calculation because there's a little more impact when I show you what I need to show you. And there will be a monthly breakdown, but take a look. The formula says annual fixed rent, just the rent, divided by the percentage that I want, that'll give me my natural breakpoint. This is what it looks like annually. So if I'm paying 60 grand in rent and I want 5%, that means I need to hit $1.2 million in sales first. Once I hit 1.2 mil in sales, anything above that, landlord gets 5%. Here's the same thing on a monthly basis. Divide 60,000 annually by the 12 months in the year. And it's the same thing. I need to see you make more than $100,000 a month in whatever you sell. And anything over 100 grand that happens at your cash register, I get a piece of that. That's how you're making up that money. I get 5%. Now there's more coming. So the landlord would collect 5% of that tenant's annual gross sales above a certain amount. So let's take a look real quick. Let's just imagine that this tenant is selling, I don't know, get widgets, and they sold $1,200,500 in widgets. We said our natural break point was $1,200,000. So look at there, tenant only sold $500 above that natural break point. Landlord demanded their 5%, and I'm cutting a check for 25 bucks. Turns out it was a sucky year, like this COVID year, right? You can see where it would benefit folks. We didn't do so great. So yeah, I'll cut you your 5%. You can have your $25. How would you like that? Fives, ones, or money order? Okay, but let's go over here to the trouble zone. See, Miguel already told it. He said that we use natural ones, but then you got the artificial ones. And the question on the table is, how bad can it be? I'm gonna show you right now. Landlord says, I want 5% of your gross sales above your artificial break point. We're just gonna set that number. I'm gonna set it at $1 million. Your client has an ice cream shop. And you say to yourself, well, $1 million in ice cream a year sounds good. I don't know nothing about ice cream, but that sounds good. And you go for it. Wrong. Nothing changed except the word artificial and the actual number we're using. Same amount of stuff got sold, $1,200,500 in ice cream. We had set that break point lower at 1 mil. So this time we sold $200,500 above the break point, and I still owe 5%. That means this year I'm cutting a check for 10 grand. When a break point is too low, a tenant will lose. When it's set low enough, a landlord wins. I'm giving you both sides of the table, my friends. Both sides of the table, depending on who you're repping, keep your eyeballs on the formula. This is a very simplified way of running this calculation, but Raymond, I needed you to see both sides of it so you could figure out what percentage was best for your client. You know what I mean? Let everybody get a picture of that. This is not a one size fits all situation. That's why even Miguel in his explanation, he had extra stuff to say. All right, real quick, put it all up there for you. I am really struggling with this particular form. Let me, optional space. I skipped something right here. Commercial lease addendum for optional space. This says, the parties agree that the rentable area of the optional space may not equal the actual or usable area within the optional space. Let me tell you something. This thing got so complicated, I had to call a lawyer. At the end of the day, a tenant may tell a landlord, I want to lease up some optional space. It sounds like right of first refusal, but it's not. Take a picture of this and let me get somewhere and show you this. So this is the lease addendum for optional space. And this is when we're discussing, I want to lease up some different space. You get everything on this page that you needed to see, down to the arrow. So this is a tenant saying, I want to lease up something else. And you will negotiate how much this is going to cost, what the pro rata share is going to be. You're going to run this just like you would the lease. The master lease stays in effect. We're just renting up some additional space. But there's an issue here for me. And in reading this, let me show you everything on this slide up to the purple box. I need to get you here. The way this thing reads, if you read it, because I'm trying to get you to review, is it looks like right of first refusal for a specific suite, but it behaves differently in that the tenant can activate the right to invoke or claim the space when they want the space. Right of first refusal is when the landlord has to approach the tenant. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? So the use of the optional space form says the tenant is approaching the landlord when they determine, you know what, I want to go ahead and use that extra space. The tenant is approaching. Right of first refusal means the tenant has to wait until landlord approaches. That's all I needed you to catch from that. And right of first refusal is form 2105. 2105. I literally had to call the attorneys. These documents were so close, I couldn't figure them out, not even in my own experience. Let me get all these things up on the slide for you. And an arrow. and a line. Lease guarantee. There's not a lot to say, except whoever signs this better be ready for it. All that is someone put their name on the line. We've talked about this before, Mr. Campos. All this says is the business could fail, but I, as an individual, will continue paying up on this lease. But that puts the individual's credit in jeopardy. And you do need whomever is going to sign this to be aware of that. Also be aware that many landlords will not allow businesses in unless someone is the guarantor to the lease. It's common now. Does anybody have anything they want to add with regard to that? Because this is a tricky thing. Nikwe, but one slide back or this slide? Where are we at?
It's actually now 2 slides back.
All right, let me just do it the easy way. That one?
One more. I think that was-
My mouse is so light in color, it's hard to see where these buttons, invisible buttons are. This one?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Just to reiterate what you were saying about guarantors, since COVID, if you're not a Walmart, expect to see a guarantor. I had a doctor that was opening an additional practice, not moving his original one, opening an additional one, and they still made him personally guarantee on top of his business, even though.
Absolutely.
Wow.
We just, the reason behind this, my friends, is because, and by the way, social security numbers and tax ID numbers, we need them. I'm going to tell you now, the reason behind the guarantor to the lease is because what game we don't play is called bankruptcy. We don't play that game. Businesses want to go bankrupt, and that means you can sit in that suite and not pay rent until the bankruptcy court finishes dictating what it is you're going to pay back, what percentage your bills and debts are reduced to, blah, blah, blah. I can't have that. I need my rent. I got mortgages to pay as well. So to avoid that game, you can go bankrupt, belly up all day, but someone is going to make good on this lease. Please know that there are options out there called buyouts and all kinds of stuff the book doesn't cover, and we ain't got that kind of time. There are ways out of it. We just don't have that kind of time to share it with you. We're at the end, my friends. 3 mere slides go. We're going to do exam review, and anyone who does have outstanding business, I'm going to let you go on and be free to the world. Here we go. Lease addendum for contingencies. Let me go ahead and fill this one in. There's several things underlined and highlighted. And down to the very bottom. Okay. Contingencies. This lease may be terminated by the tenant upon notice to the landlord prior to the expiration of the applicable contingency period if the contingency indicated below is not fulfilled. So we've got this lender subordination agreement. That SNDA is what I call it, excuse me. The SNDA contingency expires on a certain date. The tenant may terminate the lease in the event that the landlord fails to obtain the SNDA agreement on terms reasonably acceptable to the tenant from these people, from these lien holders. Tenant will sign the SNDA. Oh, there it is. They actually use the word SNDA. That's the one I'm familiar with. Just use this highlighter right here. Bam. To evidence they subordinate the position of the lease and the tenant's agreement, they're saying they're going to adjourn to the lender. So if that doesn't get taken care of, we might be terminating here. Occupancy certificates, the occupancy contingency. If we don't get this thing, we're out of here. Or the tenant may terminate the lease in the event that the C of O is not obtained. And it's because, let's see, if the tenant is, let me back up, excuse me. If tenant is responsible for obtaining the C of O, this paragraph is only going to apply if the tenant has used diligent, good faith, commercially reasonable efforts to obtain the certificate. But if they can't get it, we might have to go ahead and terminate the lease. So there's a contingency here. Some of you asked about this days ago. In the case of construction, we determined that there are massive amounts of mold. I cannot afford, mold abatement. We find all kinds of asbestos or other issues. we might need to terminate because I can't get a certificate of occupancy. I had a tenant who needed to install sprinkler systems. There weren't any. That's way too much money. Above and beyond construction, they went ahead and terminated. Then we've got a few other things. All this stuff is the same. We're just putting contingencies in place that say, if I can't get her done, I'm out. So go ahead and read this one and use it. Permitting is taking forever in Houston. If it's taking too long and we are suddenly out of the profitability season, like ice cream shop, we should have been open in March so we could have a great summer. But because of permitting, we're open in November. I'm cold at this exact moment. I see Raymond with his sweats on. It's cold. I don't want no ice cream. So if you find yourself thrown into this period where it's too late, you might pull on this contingency to say I'm out. So just note that that's there. We are now, my friends, at a point where you can choose to run this quiz and this, what am I trying to tell you? This, hello, what is the word? Review, or if any of you need to, I know Raymond's like, what? Raymond's already walking somewhere. Go on, Raymond, do what you got to do, my friend. You are free to move around. If any of you have those emergencies, go ahead and take care of what you need to take care of. In your book, when is the NDA used? Throw it in the chat. When is the NDA used? Prior to the release of that confidential information. Absolutely. I'll release it once you sign it. The NDA is that non-disclosure. Which of the following is true regarding an LOI? What's true of an LOI? It's non-binding and it states the details of the intended actions we're going to take in a lease document. Absolutely. Which of the following describes an agent's role in the contract process? What do you think? Right here, agents may insert business terms into the language of a contract. Your CRE agent is not the principal. You represent the principal. Agents are not permitted to practice law. And so what we're looking at is you are allowed to insert business terms and factual statements into a contract. So that was your choice. We're now moving into exam review. So again, if you need to go, you can. And once we're done with exam review, I'm putting you in your breakout room so you can all get together. Last question on the table. What's not true? What's not true? Bam. Disclosures like lead paint are always required in certain cases, and TREC forms and Texas Realtor forms are not always identical. That's true, they're not. Or I'm sorry, they're always identical, excuse me, and they do look alike. In our world though, what's interesting is, again, TREC doesn't promulgate anything commercial, so there's barely any commercial forms in TREC. All right, to my friends who are leaving me, I love y'all. Let's do this quick exam review for section 3 first. That way, if you wanted to catch this before you go, let's just do section 3 first. Oh, it's getting dark and I need some light. Here we go. Which of the following forms are not used in commercial real estate? Is an addendum for coastal area property? Would it be an addendum for property located seaward of the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway? Is it an addendum for seller's disclosure of information on lead-based hazards? Or is it none of them? And the question asked, which of these are not used in commercial real estate? They're all used in commercial. It's a stupid question. I told y'all it gets, they phrase them up kind of odd. Let's get you down here. By the way, this exam is jumbled up. It doesn't go in sections like the other ones have. Which Texas Realtors form is used to co-sign for a tenant? Think about what co-signing is, even when you're buying a car. Which form did we just discuss a second ago that looks like co-signing. You guarantor, you guarantee with a Y. Hey, by the way, guarantee with a Y is a very old way of spelling it, but it's the same thing as guarantee in the more common spelling. Some people think it's a spelling error and it's not. Had somebody fuss with me about that recently. Okay, commercial lease guarantee. How about this? Which Texas Realtor form is utilized by the buyer to request the seller estoppel certificates by a certain date? Would it be the commercial tenant estoppel certificate? Yeah, that would be one of them. Would it be the commercial contract improved or the commercial contract unimproved? Or would all those documents bring up the estoppel? They all bring it up. All of them bring up the need for an estoppel to be signed. Which Texas Realtor form can be used to negotiate an assumption of the seller's loan? Would it be the non-realty items addendum? Of course not. Would it be notice of information from other sources? Nah. How about this? Would it be the commercial contract for unimproved property? Would it be the commercial contract financing addendum? Or would it be those last two? Those last two, absolutely. So you could get that taken care of, excuse me, in the financing addendum or in the contract for improved property. It might be in there. Let's see. Which realtor document is utilized by brokers for a contract assignment from a buyer to another party? Would it be the contract for improved property? Would it be the contract for unimproved property? Would it be the commercial contract assignment of buyer's interest? Do we see that we don't really need exam review? Just saying, y'all covered this thoroughly in class. That's how I know you have it. Which of the following is true when we're looking at the critical dates list? Is it true that it is required by TREC? Is it required? No, it's your choice. You can use it if you want to. Is it required by Texas Realtors? It's recommended, but not required. Is it provided as a service? That's true. And is it not a required form? The way this question is written, it's a little cray-cray, but it is true that one, it's provided as a service, and two, it's not a required form. So just bear that in mind. It's a two-parter. All right, let's see. Which Texas Realtors form has the responsibilities for repairs and maintenance in it? Which form did we spend some time on that outlines repair and maintenance responsibility? Which form was that? Yay, men, the lease form. It's one of the longest ones we have right there in commercial. Which form will we use to discuss a tenant's CAM or triple net obligation? What are those two words I told you indicate we're doing triple net? What's that form called? Expense reimbursements. It's your expense reimbursement form. And if it helps you at all, tenant is reimbursing the landlord his or her expenses. Almost done with part one. Almost done there. Well, you are done. That was it. You think you're comfortable with the contracts? We reviewed that sucker to death, y'all. I think you're good. Now, anybody who needs to vamoose, you are free to do so, my friends. You can giddy up anytime you need to. Anybody else who wants to stick around, I'm about to review sections 1 and 2, starting right now. Here we go. Which of the following information can help during a negotiation process? And this is the one where I said, the test is wonky and you're better off giving me the answer I'm giving you. Understanding the boundaries of the counter property, understanding prior investment behavior of the principal, understanding the prior investment behavior of the counterparty, or A and C? Yeah, it was A and C. Again, all of these apply, but best answer, A and C. Effective agents are going to understand the desired outcomes of whom? Gail already had that answer licked. Everyone. Yep. Out of Digsy, CoStar, CIMLS, and Catalyst, which ones are the most are popular in our business? All of them? Nah, CoStar is the big dog, but they're all popular. There is a question I want to see if I can put in front of you, because this one threw me. You all know I took this exam, right? They didn't just hand me the designation. I had to take this exam, and I asked them to consider splitting these questions apart, but I don't think they did. So let me gear you up for this. Okay, one of the questions says, you're meeting with an investor for the first time, and they're interested in acquiring some commercial real estate, but they've never owned commercial real estate. What questions will you ask? And those questions might be, what's your required internal rate of return? How long you think you're going to hold on to the property? What are your expectations about this investment? And all of those things would be true. But then the very next question says, you're meeting with an investor for the very first time. It's their first time acquiring commercial real estate. They've never owned it before. That is the exact same thing the prior question said. But it says, which question should you ask first? And that's a different test question. So when you see this, don't flip out, because you're going to get two questions back to back that look identical. It's just that the thing they want you to answer is not. So again, you're going to see you're meeting with an investor for the first time. But then the question is, what questions will you ask? And then in the subsequent one, which question should you ask first? So just be ready for it, because I've seen people slow down when they're like, that's an identical question. No, it is not. So let me ask you, which one should you ask first? Should you ask, what is your budget first? Should you ask them if they're working with another agent first? Should you ask them how they intend to hold the investment first? Or should you ask them about those investment expectations first? Which one should you ask first? I keep saying first. There you go. You working with somebody else first. See, all the answers ideally are correct. The key here to this one was first. And if you're working with somebody else, then y'all move on and have a great day. Let's see. What's always true? What's always true? Higher internal rates of return values have more weight with investors than equity multiples. Equity multiples and internal rates of return depend on the investor. Internal rates of return and equity multiples are equal. You all already have it. It depends on your investor, what your investor says. So you can pull up the number and let them decide what's more important to them. How do you describe what a pro forma is? What is a pro forma doing? Doing three things. What is it doing for us, y'all? It's a simplified financial statement. We get to quickly assess cash flow, and it lets you look at future what? Performance. Exactly. Thank you, Ms. Chandra. Now, what is the industry's largest CIE? What is the biggest CIE out there? CoStar. All right. That's it. Let's see. What else we got? Which of the following can make a difference between successful negotiation and one that falls apart? Maintaining your composure, leaving the door open for future discussions, and opening up the channels of communication. One of them, some of them, all of them. When should investors consider their exit strategy? There's two periods when they should do this. Looking in the chat, before the purchase and before the sale, absolutely. Under What circumstances is our seller gonna get that boot with no tax liability? It should be never. And I want y'all to stop me because that test question answer is wrong. It is wrong. So I need to make sure, Jesus, I really need to make sure y'all don't get this tomorrow because that could be the difference between someone passing and failing. The answer, and I'd already made a note, but I don't know if it had gotten fixed. It looks like it would say always, and that's not the case. You're going to have tax liability on boot. I did mention it, but let me follow up with Shiloh and them and see if they changed it. It should be never. All right. And she is aware of it, but I just want to make sure it was changed. Y'all remind me before y'all take that test about that boot question. In a 1031 exchange, what's another name for the property that we're selling? What else can we call that? Relinquished property, absolutely. So who gets to be a qualified intermediary? Selling agent, seller's attorney, seller's accountant? None of them? None of them. You don't get to be the QI. When can a real estate agent seriously act as one? When can a real estate agent act as a QI? Because chances are you're not gonna. There's a long response here. After 2 years, preceding, I know, right? He goes, it's really long. Preceding the transfer of the relinquished property. So don't forget that the correct answer includes, you have to factor in the relinquished property. There you go. So when must we find that replacement property? When must a replacement property be acquired to qualify? When must it be acquired? Not listed, acquired. How many days? 180 days. Please pay attention to those words. The replacement property must be acquired to qualify as the 1031 exchange within 180 days. You're going to find your 3 properties within how many days? You're going to identify your 3 in 45, absolutely. So just don't get those 2 sets of numbers mixed up for yourself there. You're doing great. There's so much you already know. Which types of alternative investments may permit an investor to totally avoid capital gains taxes altogether? There you go. Opportunity zones, QOZs, qualified opportunity zones. Non-disclosure forms can be requested for what transactions? All of them, pretty much every last one of them. Anytime you're asking for documents and information, you can expect one. Which phrase, what's the phrase we associate with an LOI? It's the key, it's the heart of the LOI. What is that? That it is non-binding, absolutely. What is the name of the form that we're using to request due diligence materials from a seller? Do you remember the name of it? It's a lengthy one, but in general, what is it? Request for materials, absolutely. It's a lengthy one. It is the commercial request for evaluation materials and confidentiality agreement. So it's a lengthy one, but the answer is in the question right there. Okay, let me see. Penalties for the illegal practice of law. We haven't discussed it, but I'm going to ask you. Would it be disciplinary action from TREC? Would it be personal and professional legal liability? Would it be personal and professional civil liability? Are all those punishments possible? Every single one of them. The practicing of law, I can promise you, Every last one of you do it. You do it, you're doing it now, and you're going to do it in the future. I would encourage you to take that class so you can figure out how to stop doing it. And I'm guilty because before I wrote the class, big violator here. A couple more. Turnover vacancy gets adjusted where on the pro forma? We see an adjustment somewhere when we're looking at turnover vacancy. Where does it get adjusted? Base rental income. I see y'all caught it. It's not the base rent that we're charging, it's the income we're getting from the rent. So don't forget to mention base rental income. Calculating the equity multiple, you guys already know how to do that. You take the big number and divide it by the little number. Here we go. We also know which equity multiple is most desirable. It is the larger number. No need to linger on that one. And which Texas Realtors form can be used to ensure a broker is paid a leasing commission if the thing is leased instead of sold. Your key right there is instead of sold. Which one? The listing agreement. Exactly. You can use that document to get your money for the lease if it doesn't sell. Right now, I need to let y'all go, let you meet. Anybody has any questions, y'all holler. You all have this stuff licked. Breakout rooms coming. Y'all go ahead and linger. Or leave, either one. Twenty, what's your room number? Are you in 2? 1, okay. To my proctors in the room, everybody is in breakout session or they've chosen to leave for the day, which means you guys are free to move around, do what you need to do. We are done. Bye, Miss Vicky.
Thank you.
So welcome. Thank you
Have
all.
a good night.
Say it again.
Have a good night. I said it
I
when
will.
the mic was, yeah. You got it. Long
Thank
day.
y'all. Now that I think about it, this recording is officially done. We're in breakout session and they'll be leaving after they finish with their breakout meetings. So there's nothing left to see. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.